This evening we have a very special guest, Chris Delaney. He's a career coach. He's specialised in interviewing skills. He's a published author. He's worked with thousands of people over 15 years or so. He's a great public speaker. I know Chris from the public speaking group that we both attend, and he talks a lot of great stuff. So this is a fantastic opportunity for anyone out there watching or listening, or however you're tuning in this evening, because to get access to a published author and someone who's coached so many people over so many years is very challenging. And to have someone on board who's going to give you some good skills is priceless, really. So, Chris, good evening. Good to have you on board.
Hey, hi Jim. Thanks for inviting us down tonight. I'm really excited about this. Got loads of ideas that I want to share to help your listeners as well. So thank you very much, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. It's good to have you on board. And, you know, I want to start this evening talking about giving yourself the best chance in anything that we do. And whether it's sport, whether it's business, whether it's whatever we do in life, is about the best chance. Now, obviously what you do can have a big impact with someone going in for an interview. There are no guarantees in life, that's for sure, because there's many permutations and there's many elements to getting a job. Yet all that said and done, you've got 100 people in the room, Chris. They've all got the same qualifications. They've all got some expertise. It's about the difference that makes the difference. Now, as a coach, Chris, what do you do for people who are coming to see you to prepare for an interview? What do you do to help them get over the line?
It's a really good opening. The way you opened that was really great, actually, because this is what happens in job interviews. On average, you get 300 people applying for every advertised job, and the company will only interview 6 people. And all those 6 people have very similar experiences, very similar qualifications, and very similar skill set. And what you need to do in the interview is stand out. And when I've met thousands of people, and when you meet, you're like, how have you not got employed? You're so like knowledgeable about your sector. You're like an expert. You're an authority. Like, you got all these unique selling points. And the key is the way they answer the interview question. People give out really generic answers that don't hit the point of the question or give too much detail. So the first thing I do with clients is look at how they're answering the interview questions, and then restructure that so they can sell themselves, so it's not boring, that it's intriguing, and that it like highlights some of their unique selling points.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And so how do they identify their own unique selling points? How do they get it across? I mean, in an interview, you've got so much time to get key messages. What are some of the things that they can do? Anyone out there watching who's going for an interview, not that I'm suggesting that they take on what they will. In the end, what you do and is very effective and will work and has worked for many years. Yet all that said and done, if people got their own way of doing things, then carry on doing what you do. It's just an insight. This is an invaluable experience into the mind of someone who's done this for 15 years or so with thousands of people. Now, how can you make that X factor come across, Chris? It's not easy, at least I think, to sort of like really get that across in a short time.
Yeah, well, I do all like the NLP stuff and the coaching stuff and all this like controlling your states and stuff, but it's more simple than that. Most people's barriers is just that they don't understand what the interviewer is going to ask them, so they can't prepare the answers. So all you need to do in the first instance is look at the job spec. On the job spec, it's got like a list of criteria, and companies are great at helping us out. They'll tell us what criteria is essential and what criteria is desirable. All the essential criteria will be turned into an interview question, so you can predict the question, which means you can then predict the answer. And one of the things I find with quite a lot of clients is they can give the generic answer, you know, I'm a good communicator, I'm a good team player, and give some examples. But what they also have to pull in is some stuff that makes them stand out, that makes them unique. But what happens is, because people have lived this life for 20 years, they've worked in an organisation or a sector for 20 years, they've been doing all this stuff, getting these results, you know, massive achievement. But because they do it every day, they don't realise it's something unique, it's something different. So what I do first is like break down their day, their week, their month, look at their achievements over the last like 12 months, 2 years and 5 years, and get them to recognise the things that they're doing that other people aren't. And I get them to compare themselves to other people in their organisation, what they've done, initiatives they started, achievement they've achieved, key stuff that they do, like turn projects from a failure to a success. And I get them to look at themselves from a different perspective. And by doing that, they can sort of go, yeah, you know, I can see what you're saying now. This is something that I've got, that someone who's worked in the same sector for the same amount of years, I've never even thought about doing. That might be work ethic, it might be the way you communicate with people, it might be that you take action, or it just might be about a skill that other people don't have. But everyone who's been successful in their career has got something unique that makes them stand out. You need to explain that in the job interview.
That's a really good point, and anyone out there watching this evening, that's a fantastic point where you mentioned the questions. There's a very good probability you're going to ask questions around the specification of the job, and you know, how often do people think about that? And I know from my experience of working with people over many years too, how often does someone sit down and think, you know what, there's a very good chance they're going to ask these questions. They might not ask all of them, but there's a very good chance they're going to ask some. Otherwise, you wouldn't go for an application process. And even sitting down, I think, and going through those questions and rehearsing them is going to give you a better chance. Even taking an hour or so rehearsing them and being fluent. Because for me, I think, Chris, in my opinion, when I've been doing the interviewing, when I've been on the other side interviewing people for various jobs across a broad range of areas, one thing that would sort of strike me from a psychological point of view, when I put my psychological hat on, is when people were hesitant in their answer. I'd always think, well, why are they hesitating? If they know their job and if they can fulfill that criteria, nerves aside and everything else that goes with it, I'd always think, because I'd try and keep it informal, the interview room, yeah, when you ask them a question based on specification, tell me a time you did X, Y, Z, and they stumbled, you start to think, well, actually, if you've done that for so many years, why are you stumbling? And I think, in my opinion, if you, not necessarily they're making it up, it might just be they're so focused on the outcome of getting the job, they get nervous, and we all know what nerves do under stress and what stress does to people. So I think that's really important to rehearse. Is there any way that you would rehearse the questions, Chris? Is there any way that you could sort of go over it? What approach to use?
It's such a good point that you're making there. I did a lot of research a couple of years ago, and I asked loads of people who like constantly fail job interviews how long they prepared, how long they practiced for, and then I did the same question to loads of people who was really successful. And what I found is the people who was unsuccessful, on average, prepared for only 45 minutes before the job interview, where the successful ones used to prepare for 4 to 5 hours collectively by prepping the questions, going through the answers, making it stronger and stronger and stronger, rehearsing with a coach or in front of a mirror or on their own. Is that repetition is the key to learning any skill, and that's what people need to do constantly, like practice, practice, and practice. What I do with my clients is, before they come and get into like write down 5 or 6 predicted questions and then the answers that they will give. And in the interview session, we get into like reword that answer. So you write down an answer and then you rewrite it 3 times, giving it like an opening statement, an example, and then summarising what you did. It's a really strong structure, that. So tell me a time about when you communicated. You open by saying, I have that skill. Well, in all my previous roles, I've communicated on the telephone, by email, face-to-face, or whatever it is you've done. And then you give an example to that. An example of this is when I was managing a £1 million project and I had to communicate to managing directors and give like a real good example and then summarise it. So I get people's answers and I get them to rewrite it 3 times so it becomes a stronger structured answer. Then I get them to practice it over and over and over again, like 10 to 15 times. So when you get to that job interview and they ask you any question, in this example, about communications, it just flows out of you. You don't need to think. Your subconscious mind lets it just pour out. And that's when you can focus on like your state, your gestures, you know, facial expressions. You can tweak all that side of it then.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And for those watching this evening, it's a bit like when you drive a car. If you've driven a car, the first time you drive it, it's first gear, second gear, stall. You're constantly thinking about the process. Now you get in the car, you drive without thinking about it. You go to your destination, you've got to think about it. You might be apprehensive. Yet if you go often enough, it's an unconscious confidence. And I think what Chris is saying there for the people out there is you get to the point where it's embedded in the unconscious mind. You're not having to think about it. You're there, you're hardwired to succeed. And it's very similar to elite athletes, Chris. In the world of sport and high-level sport, they rehearse, they visualize, over and over and over again. I've worked with athletes who visualize their event hundreds of times in a week, over and over again, because visualization is practical, and you can do it anywhere. You can do it at various time frames. It's more accessible. They say that the mind can't differentiate on many levels between a real experience and one that's not real. So it makes a lot of sense to build those pathways in the brain and strengthen the opportunity you've got when you get there to succeed in the interview. So that's a really good practical advice that Chris has given there for anyone who's got an interview coming up, where you rehearse it, you go over the questions. And I think what's really important too, where you specified about the information, you're very clear and concise about the information, because you think about it, where if you turn up to an interview and you've got confidence and belief in what you do and you are very clear and concise, you're going to have a much better chance. Years ago, Chris, I was working with a group of graduates, and they were very knowledgeable, very academic, very knowledgeable, yet all the will in the world, when it came to going for an interview, they struggled. They struggled to articulate themselves in that environment. You know, sociable and all things that, you know, good young people they were, yet all that said and done, what they struggled with is to articulate themselves into that big wide wall, so to speak. And I think that, do you think, Chris, that sometimes, you know, we go through university and academia, and as good as academia is, and I think it has its place, I don't think academia is the be all end all. I know some academics couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag, but academia as positives, do you think that in academia they don't really prepare people, at least in my experience of going to uni or my experience of working with university graduates, there's not really any significant preparation to go for an interview? Do you find that in your experience? You've done this for a long time now, that academia doesn't prepare you for the world of interviews and how to pitch yourself in the best possible way?
Well, every school in the UK, every college and every university has to have a careers team so students can access this support. But what I find is that students rarely access this support. So they could go to the careers advisor and get like interview preps and practice, do mock interviews. And not all unis do the mock interview stuff, but they definitely give careers advice and support. Yeah. But it's just like the lack of practice. People get scared, so they think, like, I'm going to start applying for jobs. I've got an interview coming up. Oh, I'm really, really nervous. And instead of like doing something to overcome that, going to the careers team, practicing interviews, working out the questions and answers, they just put it to the side and think, I'll do something else. It's like the fight or flight, isn't it? I'll leave that, I'll get away from it and focus on something that I'm enjoying. Where the people who are successful actually go, right, I've got this interview coming up, I'm a little bit nervous, so what are the 3 things that I need to do different in an interview to be more confident, to express myself well? And when they pick those 3 things and take action, that's why people are successful in job interviews. Not the best employee gets the job, the best interviewee gets the job.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad you mentioned that. For anyone watching, certainly in the UK, you know, a college, a uni, a school, there are mechanisms in place, careers advisors who can help you, and I'm sure that you get a lot of value out of that. Definitely, I would recommend approaching them and opening up some sort of dialogue. The only thing I would say in my experience, and not undermining them, some great people who work in that environment, they're good at what they do, they're very knowledgeable. The only thing with me is the extra mile from a technical point of view, from a process point of view, where the student can go there, at least in my experience, Chris, of working with young people or any person of any age who's gone for an interview, even the ones who do go to the careers advisors, where they tend to sort of fall a little bit short is that the preparation, it's effective to a point, yet where I found it might be a little bit limiting, at least in the experiences that I've had with working with people, is they don't focus so much on process, some of the key processes. And in my experience, I'll give you a quick example and I'll see what your thoughts on it. I was working with someone who's gone for this job interview, and she was completely beside herself. Now, she had approached a careers advisor, and I can't speak about the experience that she had or whatever, but from what she told me, she found some worth in there. Yet all that said and done, it didn't really alleviate the anxiety that she had. To be fair, the careers advisor has their role and know that their role has a specification. Yeah, I found when I worked with this young person, she had an anxiety about the interview. Now she was placing a big priority on the outcome. If I get this job, I can do X, Y, Z. So she's really focused on the outcome. A bit like a sports person who's got the goal of winning a medal in mind or winning a championship. It's great to have that goal, but then you've got to go to process. So what I did with this young person with some NLP techniques like anchoring and visualization and techniques that weren't used in, or at least she said that they didn't allude to in the interview with the careers advisor, to help her focus on the process, focus on the questions, focus on application effort, control the controllables, put the outcome to one side. What's the best chance for you to get the job? So what I was able to do outside the remit of careers advice is to sort of tweak things and bring things in. And I use, and for anyone who's not sure some of the jargon, anchoring and visualization, you're more than welcome to email me and Chris, and he can copy it in more detail. But we've short time this evening, so we won't go into too much detail in some of the technicalities, but you can email for more information. Now, do you think that someone like yourself, Chris, you work on independently as well, do you think that you can sort of open things up and go just an extra mile and bring things in like that can really make a massive difference? You know, the anchoring, the visualization. With a normal careers advisor, no doubt some of them do that, yet all that said and done, in my experience, the ones that I've worked with, the people who've gone for the interviews who've talked about seeing careers advisor, they've mentioned that they've not really done any psychological strategies. They've talked about the interview, they've talked about rehearsing for it to a certain point, but not gone deeper into the psychology of the interview.
Yeah. I think what you find is whatever people have an expertise in, that's what they'll do. So the careers guidance officer will do careers guidance. If you go to a confidence coach, they'll do confidence coach techniques. So people go to their specialisms. And maybe where the stuff I do is a little bit different is because I specialise in interview techniques. And I've got a background in careers guidance, in confidence coaching and all this psychology stuff. I've been able to like pull all the best bits out of different disciplines and make it relevant for the interview situation. So I sort of do like 5 things. The first thing is get a client, and most clients I find who come for interview coaching are full of anxiety and fear and got low self-esteem. They don't believe they're good enough to do that job. They think they've been faking it for years and years and years. So start off by doing loads of confidence stuff, using anchoring, using NLP techniques, using emotional intelligence to change their state. So when they go to the job interview, they can go there feeling relaxed, calm, and really, really, really confident. And then move on to...
Sorry, Chris, sorry to interrupt there. I didn't want to interrupt. You're making some really, really good points. Sort of before you move on and go into the other points, why is that? Why do they have lack of confidence?
It's because it's such a random situation that we're not in every day. Like most people, on average, will go to an interview once every 3 years. We tend to change our jobs more frequently than we did 10 years ago. People used to stay in jobs for 25 or 30 years. Now it's like 3 to 5 years. So we only go into interviews randomly. And what our mind does, it goes, interview, that's generic, what does that mean? And it relates it to public speaking, because I'm speaking to strangers and the centre of attention. And most people go through negative public speaking experiences when they're in high school or college, where they have to stand up in front of a class and read out a story, Romeo and Juliet book as an example. They get it wrong, they mess it up, everyone starts pointing and laughing at him, they feel really, really bad. They look at the teacher pleadingly saying, can you let me sit down? And the teacher's like, no, carry on. And that negative experience is anchored to them actually. They go, public speaking equals fear and anxiety. They go, 3 years later, they go, job interview, what's that? Oh, it's a public speaking thing. That equals fear and anxiety. It's associations in your mind. And because people then don't practice, rehearse, and prepare, that increases the fear and anxiety and making the actual day, the job interview day, just a terrible situation for them.
That's really interesting stuff. And I think that they should definitely bring that into curriculum on some level. I think that it should be more than an option. I think that they should bring it in and help people, not just for interviews. I think just in life in general, you're going to face many situations in life where you feel nervous, apprehensive, and anxious, and not as a treatment protocol, not to treat anxiety. Each case is based on formulation, but certainly to help people become more well, in the sense that their beliefs about themselves, the world, and people around them isn't having a big impact on the way they think and feel. And that's really interesting, that point that you make there. And to think that the debilitation, imagine going into an interview, anyone out there, and I'm sure there's people watching this evening who've gone to interviews, being almost debilitated to the point that you're nervous, anxious, and really it should be a time to shine, to go out there and not boast about your achievements. Glory, bask in the glory. You work hard, you've studied for a long time, and go out there and express yourself and enjoy it, and see what happens, really. And I think that the more you practice, the more you refine the skills, the more chance you've got. Now, it's quite fascinating that, to the point, let's say, Chris, you've gone for interviews, and how do you help people handle rejection? So you've gone for 5 or 6 interviews, 10, 15. What's the most number of interviews for someone coming to see you? What would you say? And I know we respect people's confidentiality, but what would you say would be the most anyone's been for interview before they've come to see yourself? What would be a ballpark figure? At what point do they decide, you know what, I'm going to see Chris, I just can't do this anymore?
What I find is I get a lot of people who are employed, and a year before they've gone for a load of interviews, failed, gone for lower level jobs, and then been successful because their skills and experience have been so high above that salary that a year later they got to go, oh no, I'm in the wrong job, I need to get back up to that level that I'm at, this is too low in my skill base. So then they start going for job interviews again, 2 or 3, fail them, and then they come. So collectively, it's normally about 9 or 10 job interviews, and then they sort of go, enough's enough. They know at some level they can do better than what they're doing. And I do work with loads of people like authorities, experts in their sector, but they just can't get those 20 years experience over to the interviewer in a 45-minute job interview, which is often 8 to 10 questions. And that's where I come in, helping with the confidence, helping with the structure of the answers, helping using stories to get their points across, and then all these other like persuasion and influencing techniques that you can sort of bounce onto that as well.
Yeah. So in terms of the interviewer, what are they looking for in a candidate? So they ask questions based on the specification. What are the key things that they're taking note of? How do they make the decision? And I've got one for you. I have a friend of mine, and she went for an interview recently, and she told me that she'd missed out and had a scoring system.
Yeah.
There's a scoring system in place, and it kind of baffled me in the sense that they have this scoring system in place. And what's this scoring system all about, Chris? I know obviously different organizations got a different scoring system. Yeah, how can you quantify someone in a scoring system?
So loads of companies now do the scoring system. It's all about equal opportunity, so everyone gets a fair chance. And by having a panel of people scoring you, they put all those scores together, and the person with the highest skill will get offered the job. So it's all about giving everyone a fair chance, and rather than just listening to the whole interview, forgetting lots of stuff, and then just going off like a gut feeling. But what happens is people make decisions off their guts, not in their brain. So they might ask you questions, and every time you mention a keyword or a key experience or a key skill, they will tick that off on their scoring sheet, and that might add to a point. But those points are on a spectrum, and if someone likes you, they will score that same answer a higher point compared to someone who don't like you, who still recognise that you got a skill or an experience they desire. So a big part of the job interview is rapport building, likability, creating that initial positive response from the interviewer. We do stuff like we tell people to go on social media pages for the person who's interviewing them, find out what their hobbies, their interests are. You can even go a bit deep and look at people's personalities by the way they word different things, and then you can talk using their language, or they sort of say, oh, they always do like a bit of chatting to get you like chatting. Oh, you had a nice weekend. What you've been doing before you came in? If you know they're into canoeing, you can sort of say, oh yeah, well I've been looking at buying a kayak recently, and they're like, oh, I'm into canoeing. It just gets a bit of a response going. Or you ask them questions, how's your day been? Have you been interviewing all day? By getting a little bit of chat going, a bit of friendly banter, a bit of rapport building, they start to like you even more.
Yes.
When you read loads of interview books as well, they sort of talk about people make an impression in the first 3 minutes meeting you, or the first 3 to 5 minutes meeting you. And the truth is, though, people make an impression about you with like milliseconds of meeting you. As soon as they see your mind is going din 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 din, I've got an opinion about you straight away. And that's why they always say like dress smart and walk with a good posture. But that's only a little thing. Your initial communication, the way you interact, if you're feeling confident rather than looking anxious, if you shake a hand in a confident way or ask them questions, you come across a lot stronger character. But if you show interest in that interviewer, if you show passion for your sector that you're applying for, if you're really excited about working for that organisation, that all comes across in your answers, in your body language, in your gestures, in your tonality. And it's those things that most interview books don't talk about that gets people to go, God, there's something about this person. I don't know why I like him, but I just like this person. And every time you answer a question, you naturally get scored higher on that scoring sheet. Rapport makes a massive difference in the way they score you.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And I think if you can cover every angle as much as you can, you've got a greater chance. So certainly if she's watching this evening, if she goes for an interview again, it would make a lot of sense to understand some of the key words and use the key words as well as get that rapport. If you're working on both angles, you've got the best chance to get that. And yeah, not to focus purely on the keywords, but certainly use some of the keywords and get the rapport. How can, I mean, you mentioned rapport there, and you mentioned ways you can get rapport. People generally like people who like them to a degree. We know that it's been scientifically proven. And if you don't sort of believe in the science or believe in what we're saying this evening, think of your best friends and think how similar you are to your best friends and who you're most comfortable with. And I know the first answer I'll get, my friends are different to me. Yeah, they might be different in certain areas of their life behaviorally, yet there's a very good chance their values, what's important to them, is very similar to what's important to you. You've got very similar political views, very similar views about the world, and think about it. If you're out there watching and there's any question about how we like being around people who are similar to us, think about your circle of friends, where they're from, what they're like, and that's a general rule. Now, one way of doing that these days, you've got social media. Yeah, you can see and look at company profiles and LinkedIn, everything else, and get an idea of the person you're going to be meeting and so on and so forth. Is there any other way that you can turn up to the interview to get that rapport? That split second is going to be so instrumental in moving forward. Is there any other way that you can get that rapport, Chris? Is there any other way you can sort of make that big impact?
Yeah, definitely. What people have to remember as well is out of those 300 people who apply for that job, only 6 of you got interviewed. They like you already. You got the skills, you got the experience, you got the qualifications that they want for that job. All you need to do now is convince them that you're better than the other 5 people going for that job interview. And that's why likability is such a key factor in that. And we're going to dress smart, we're going to do our hair nice, we're going to walk in confident, shake hands, all the little things, which all help and add to it. But the key thing is that it comes down to 2 things. If you're an authority in what you're talking about, if you come across like you're an authority, you're an expert, you know more than other people, you've got a vast array of knowledge, we instantly as humans respond better to that. Most of us as sheep will follow the leaders and we follow authority people. And if we believe you're an authority, because you're talking about stuff in so much detail, you've got this wide range of knowledge, you've always got an answer to every question. If people see you as an authority, they'll believe every single thing you say. So if you prove that you've got this knowledge and expertise at the beginning of the interview, when you're answering later questions, they'll naturally agree to what you're saying straight away because they'll see you as like someone on a pedestal a little bit higher. And that authority is like absolutely massive. And then the second thing, which I think is like key to like winning job interviews, is having a passion for the thing you're doing. So I, like you, Jimmy, I love helping people. It's my thing. I do it for free. I do it with paid clients. I'll go to workshops. I'll do one-to-ones. It doesn't really matter in what form. As long as I'm helping people, I get like a proper buzz from it. And when I go to networking events and people talk to me, and I get like really passionate and really animated, and I talk about all these things. When we're doing this interview, like I'm happy to share as many techniques as people want. I like to give loads of stuff, and people respond so positive to that because they can see I'm passionate about it. And that's what you got to do in your job interview. If you're a chef and they're sort of saying like, what sort of dishes can you do? You're like, oh, I can make a lasagna, a roast dinner, a cake. That's different from going, my favourite dish, the thing that I love doing is, you when you talk from a place of passion, you warm people, you excite people. People want to be with you, and that's why your best friends are the people that have that passion about them, the people who talk and are interested in you.
Yeah,
in job interview, like so passionate, show interest, and then show your authority as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that if you choose something you love to do, you'll never do any selling, so to speak. Now, it's really interesting you talked about how the authority and the position of authority. I once did a social experiment, Chris, where working as a lecturer, what I would do over a period of time, on the group would come along, it'd be a new group of students. On the first morning of meeting the group, I'd turn up just casual. At first break, after first break, I say to the group, you can all go home now. And there was a bit of banter and laughter and so on and so forth. On one occasion, from a social experiment point of view, I was wearing a suit and a tie. And after the first break, I said, you know what, you can all go home now. And they all stood up and were about to leave. Isn't it fascinating that when I turned up to lecture on that first morning with a new group in just casual wear, like I normally do, and I said, you can all go home now, they took it as a joke. They just took it as a joke. They banter, laughter. When I said the same thing in a suit, they were literally packing up and looking over at each other to see who would be the first one to leave, should they leave. Can we go home now, sir? Go home if you want to.
It's so interesting. I love the whole research and authority. There's a great experiment done in America, I think in like the late 80s, early 90s. So they had all this situation, but basically what they did, when a nurse was walking past the phone would ring, like the doctor's phone. The nurse would go over and answer it, and the doctor would say, patient, the patient who's in bed like 5D needs this particular medication straight away. I was going to do it before, I forgot to do it. Can you go and do it right now? It's a bit of an emergency. And the nurse would then go from that phone call to the medicine cabinet, get the medicine, and then walk over to where the patient was. Now, this medicine that they asked her to get would have killed the patient, but because an authority, a doctor, even though she's not seen this person, it was just a phone call, that title, that job title, was enough authority to make her do something that could potentially kill people. We've been a stage situation. Obviously, people stopped her from giving any medication, but people respond to people in authority. And if you can show yourself as an expert in a job interview by talking about new technologies, talk about the change in the sectors, contrast how things are now to past things, talk about stuff that you've initiated, stuff that's worked and not worked, by just expressing all your knowledge and expertise, people go, this person knows what they're talking about. And remember, often HR or managers interview you, not people who are knowledgeable about the actual job you're doing. So as an example, an engineer will have so much engineering knowledge that they can express in the job interview. But if a HR team from that engineering company is interviewing you, they won't have as much knowledge. So you can become an authority in that power situation. We normally see the interviewer on the pedestal, but interviewers see you as the expert on the pedestals. And when you know that, when you realise that, your confidence will increase anyway, because you're teaching that interviewer the things you know. And that's a completely different power play to you answering questions on someone you perceive as an expert. Yes. It's not you're teaching people what you know. And when you feel that change in authority, you come across more confident.
That's really fascinating. Where if there's anyone out there going to the job interview where you go in there and assert your authority, and you go in there and you're the expert, and it's almost to a sense where you're interviewing them. The shoe's on the other foot, where you've got the passion, you tell them what you're all about, and bask in your own glory. You get out there and share your experiences, and without there's a fine line between breaking on and coming across as arrogant. But if you've done really well and you're good at what you do, then go out there and tell them what you're all about. I think that's the key. And there's no real hard sell. You're good at what you do. It's taken years to get there. You're unique, and certainly go out there and just, I wouldn't say enjoy it, might be a bit of a stretch yet. He's saying that go out there and just bask in your glory. That's kind of reframing it, I think. It's definitely what you said there is really important for people going for an interview, where, you know, frame it differently. See it as an opportunity for you to go in there and talk about your skills, what you're all about, what you can offer them, your experience, and get that across in the best way you can, through stories, through metaphors, through experiences. And you made a great point there. You're the expert. You're the one who is there. You're the one who's done it, wore the t-shirt, the expert. The only thing I would say, in my experience, where, I mean, that's great stuff. And, you know, years ago, I was working with someone who was preparing for an interview, and he had this interview. It was a promotion, actually, in the same organization. It was a promotion. Now, his wife called me out of the blue and said, my husband's going through a promotion. It was in the army. I'll keep the guy through confidentiality purposes, I won't name. And he had this interview for promotion. And I said, well, okay, if he needs help, why is he not calling me? And she said, well, he doesn't really buy into all this psychology stuff. And I said, well, you know, it's his call, really. It's his point of view. The only thing I would say, in my opinion, in that situation, I just said to his wife, if he doesn't call, then there's no point. He's got to call me. So he actually called later that day, and he says, I've heard a lot about you. I know you're doing sports and therapy, and I've got really promotion. And at the moment, even the thought of it, I cannot breathe even thinking about this promotion. I said, okay, tell me a bit about it. And it was about a week from when he called, was a week away, and he told me that, you don't get it, Jim. It was a physical as well as a practical and interview discussion he had to do. And he said, if I don't get this job, I don't get the increase in wage, I don't get an increase in wage, I can't do X, I can't do Y, I can't do Z. The marriage to pay for, wedding to pay for, holiday, and so on and so forth. I've budgeted on getting this promotion. Now it's getting closer, albeit it's almost nailed on, even the thought of it. Now, he had to do a physical test too. And the physical test was, I think, off the top of my head, run 1.5 miles in a certain time and do a number of press-ups, whatever. And he could normally do that comfortably. Now that he was thinking about promotion and was getting closer, he went to the track to practice, and he just, you know, that stupid place to get those yips, and he just couldn't do it. And he said, well, what can I do? I said, come down and we'll see what we can do. So I talked to him about it. And for me, Chris, it was about going to process. I said, put the outcome to one side. The goal is to get the job. What's the best chance to get the goal? We worked on visualization, visualizing doing the interview, the questions being asked, doing the run. There's no point doing any physical running, otherwise you could risk an injury. So I said, visualize yourself running the actual 1.5 miles in that time frame. And when you get to a point you feel the nerves kicking in, we did an anchor, and it was a kinesthetic anchor, and so on and so forth. And it was fascinating, really, that it was such a turnaround. Now, Monday of that week was the interview and the physical test. I texted him, I said, how'd you get on? He goes, bad news, to cancel the test. They put it to the Tuesday. But then he texted me on Tuesday saying, Jim, I've smashed it. He got, Chris, within 2 seconds of the time that we visualized and rehearsed in his mind. And now I consult him on other areas, other issues. He's working his way up in an organization. Now, the fascinating thing is the investment that he put towards those 2 sessions we did, and the gain he got from getting promotion. I'm not putting his success down to me. He might have found a way of doing it on his own. I don't know. But I guess it's like driving a car. We can probably find a way to drive a car, but we hire an instructor, because the instructor's got the experience that can facilitate. So I kind of see a coach almost like a facilitator, like a driving instructor analogy, where we'll probably find the answers. Yet all that said and done, you hire an instructor, you're going to get there a very good chance quicker, with a lot less problems and issues you might have if you don't use an instructor. Now, for me, it's priceless, really. And not my words, his words. He said how instrumental it was And that was for a skeptic, Chris. That was someone who was skeptical about all these sort of techniques and so on and so forth. Do you find that yourself? Do you find some people in first instance a bit skeptical about the mind and how it works and how important it is and how we can help refocus the mind, and how important do you think the process is to sort of put the app on one side and just focus on the steps to get there?
Yeah, I think like it's really interesting that story you just told me that, because what you focus on, you feel. So when that client initially before we met you was focusing on this promotion of don't get it, I'm there because I bought this house or I bought this thing. It was like he had all these like different chunks, he had like loads of things to think about. When your mind's full, and everyone does this in job interviews, oh, don't get a job, it's going to ruin the relationship, it's going to ruin my finances, it's going to ruin my house, it's going to ruin my career. They had all these negative things. If all these things are ruined, then all this other stuff's going to be ruined. And in the end, they like imagine themselves being homeless on the street.
Yeah.
Having all these stuff in your mind, all these different chunks, is so confusing. That's what procrastination is. It's overthinking everything into millions of pieces, millions of steps, millions of goals, and then you go, instead of focusing on all that pain, I'll just step away and not do nothing. But by getting them to focus on visualizing on the running, by visualizing on a job interview, they're focusing on themselves, doing something positive, being successful. And when you focus on that, you feel that positiveness, you feel that success, and that's like, I know there's so much more that you would have done with that client, but by changing their perspective from think about the negative to think about the positive, change their state. And when you change the way you feel, your behaviour naturally changes. Anyway, you act in a different way. I had a client once who came because the last interview she went to, she got into the interview, and after the first question, she got up and she said, I literally ran out of the interview. She got so scared and so fearful, she ran from the job interview and never went back again. So when I meet a lot of clients, they come because they're semi-confident. They've gone to some interviews, they've been successful with some, not successful with others, but they know they can get better paid jobs, better salaries, or feel more confident by getting a session from me. But the clients who come with I've had clients who are phobic of job interviews, they just won't go to them. But then ones that do a lot of hypnotherapy stuff with them, and they're the clients that are like, what is it you're going to do? Like, they're really skeptical about the type of techniques that I'm going to use with them. And I find it hilarious because they paid money for a hypnotherapist but don't really know what's going to happen. I was like, why didn't you ask more questions when you booked the session? But when you realise it's just about changing your perspective, reframing things, and really the key is giving that client choice. They're going to, by the end of that session, they're going to be able to choose how to feel in that situation. They might get there and feel a little bit anxious, but then they can use a technique we taught them and then feel calm and relaxed. Or they can practice the technique, so when they go to that job interview, their immediate association, which used to be fear and anxiety, is now calmness and confidence. And what we do a lot in the sessions is teach people choice. I can give you a structure for your interview answers. You can use that structure, or you can do something else. I can give you techniques to make you feel relaxed, or you can be anxious. I can do it in a certain way so it becomes a subconscious habit, but you're in control. You can choose how you want to be in that situation. And that's what I think I'm trying to teach all the time is choice. Let people choose the best thing that will help them, the best way to answer that question, the best way to feel in that situation, the best technique that they can choose themselves. It's all about choice for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and you can create options, alternatives, experience, and in a way, Chris, it's almost like you dehypnotizing them from one hypnotic trance. And because really, when you think about it, on an esoteric level, I get too deep and meaningful. We create the meaning, where we create the meaning for the interview, and the association we've got with the interview, or the person has with the interview, is a form of trance in itself to a certain extent, because they've got this association with that experience, and the association they've got the experience is so deep, and the beliefs they've got around the experience and what's going to happen and how that's going to escalate, and all that in itself is almost like a state of awareness, and now you've got to sort of evaluate those beliefs. And for me, what I sort of do in my case formulation when I work with anxiety around interviews, I look at the event itself, Chris, the event being the interview, and then I sort of assess the thoughts about the event. What's their perception? What are they thinking? How do they see? What are their beliefs about the actual interview itself? Then I sort of question the validity about the beliefs. And certainly in the guy I work with I mentioned before, we sort of, in our first session, we talked about the beliefs about the interview, had a force about the interview. Then we looked at the way those beliefs were impacting the behavior, how the behavior is linked to the emotion, and the force were having an impact on the emotion, how physiologically that has an impact physiologically. And one thing that we could do then is break it down to a more manageable level and see if what it was. And then we could apply interventions around the beliefs, challenge the beliefs using NLP meta model, RR model, go deeper. Then we could look at ways to work on behavioral strategies, and they tended to focus around the visualization. We focused on the rehearsal. We focused on the body language and so on and so forth. We looked at emotional strategies. We looked at emotional strategies we can help them with to regulate the emotional, what you mentioned earlier, emotional intelligence. We looked at physiological strategies, breathing, meditation, walking, and that way, bit by bit, collectively, you give yourself the best chance to succeed. And you can reevaluate what you said there, reframe, reevaluate the situation, and see it for what it is. What I would do is strip it to the bare bones. When people were really debilitated, and like you mentioned there, and that's a really great point. I work with people in similar situations where they talk about walking out of interviews. They've got so anxious they've actually walked out. And in a way, Chris, sometimes, I would recommend anyone to reach out. Don't wait till they get to that point to contact with Chris or myself. And I tend to be the last chance to do it. I don't know about you, but people tend to come and see me when all else has failed. And I've talked to people who come and see me and they've walked out of interviews and that's been the final straw. Now, with people who that debilitated, sometimes they even go back to work on controllable factors. What can you control? What can you do to start with? And we sort of focus on application, do the best you can, and effort. All you can do is all you can do. And even we take baby steps, one step at a time, and build it back up again and go forward. And certainly in one case, I had a woman similar to yourself who ran out of the interview. We sort of stripped it right back again and went back to manageable level and talked about things that she could control behaviorally and how she could regulate her emotion and physically, breathing strategies, and reevaluate the beliefs around the interview itself. And it was quite fascinating to see her take these baby steps to flourishing and just becoming this, a little bit like when you go to the speaking group, Toastmasters, where you see someone come in the first talk they do, and it's almost like they're hiding themselves. So a few months later, they're out there and expressive, and it's really fascinating to see someone flourish bit by bit. And do you have like a protocol, Chris, where you get someone who's on the severe end of the spectrum of anxious for the interview, where you sort of guide them step by step? Do you sort of have a protocol for that, or?
Yeah, I think what happens is people, it's all like so subconscious. You use the driving lesson metaphor a couple of times, and when you said, I was thinking like, you get clients who go, oh, I'm not gonna get the gears wrong today. No, I'm not gonna stall the car. I'm not gonna stall the car. I'm not gonna stall the car. And they walk to the driving lesson going, I'm not gonna stall the car. I'm not gonna stall the car. They get in and then stall the car straight away because that's what they're focusing on. And as an instructor, or in our case as a coach, we get them to recognise what they're doing wrong or what they're doing, and then create options and then give them choices. And that's what it's all about. Once you can recognise it, you can find a new strategy, a new way of being, teach you all these different techniques, and then long term, your subconscious will just do the positive way of preparing for that interview. You'll just feel more confident naturally. Your answers will intuitively come out of you because you can break it down instead of having all those chunks about all these potential disasters that can happen if you don't get this job. Break it down to actually, what is it I need to do now to be a little bit more confident in that job interview? What do I need to say differently so my answer is a little bit stronger? Don't have a lot of stuff. Focus it down to one goal that you can do that day. Achieve that, and then the next day, what else can I do today to make it stronger? And that will all compound. If each day you get 1% more confident at job interviews over a month's period, that compound of confidence is so powerful and so strong. And that's what we do. We're giving strategies so they're intuitive, their subconscious mind, that the job interview in a couple of months' time, we'll just let it all pour out of them.
And this day and age, Chris, people, you mentioned in the beginning about the number of interviews people will go for, the world we live in these days. I mean, years ago, You literally do 1 or 2 interviews and that'd be it. You might do an internal interview and so on and so forth. Yeah, the old days, the old job for life, so to speak. And in someone's professional career these days, Chris, how many interviews do you think they'll have as a general? I know some people have more than others and so on and so forth. As a general rule, how many interviews do you think people have through the course of their professional career?
You also got to remember as well that it's a global job market now. Years ago, when we had Job for Life, the competitors were people either in the UK or often just people in your town, where now people will relocate for jobs, and jobs can be done in different countries, and you know the products are the projects that you're working on. You don't have to be in a physical office these days. So some of the job interviews are like your global competitors. But I reckon on average now you'll have 3 careers in your lifetime. So instead of having 1 job for life, you'll have 3 careers, and most people stay in a job every or move jobs every 3 to 5 years. So if you're working from the age of 22 to 66, and you have a new job every 5 years, you'll probably go for 3 or 4 interviews for each job offer that you get. So what's that? That's like is that like 200 interviews? There's a lot in it. It's a lot of interviews that people never prepare for.
Yeah, that's really fascinating when you think about that, because it can change the whole direction of your life. You get that job, you don't get that job, and I suppose in the end, there's no guarantees in life. You can prepare all you want, and there's no guarantee. Yeah, all that said and done, for me, is about being the best chance, standing the best chance to get the job. And I think for me, in my experience, it's not so much you're not getting a job is obviously can be devastating and everything else that goes with it. To know you could have done more, to know that you could have done better if you prepared. You'll never know that, not knowing if there's something you could have done different. And at least if you go for that job interview and you throw everything you got at it, best you can, you don't get the job, you can hold your hands up. You know what? Not meant to be. We move on.
You know what as well, like also like the people who are really phobic about job interviews, and we do like loads of like hypnotherapy stuff, really like loads of strategies, and it's like loads and loads of stuff that we put in there, make them like phobic free, and you know people overcome these phobias in 1 session. In 60 minutes you can have a phobia of job interviews or a phobia of spiders or whatever. 1 session you can be cured with all these techniques. But often with people who come for job interviews, it's just little things that they could do different, like really small things that have a massive, massive impact. And one of them is what we keep talking about, is like preparing and practicing and rehearsing. That's like absolutely massive. But just having a structure for your interview answers gives you a starting point, a middle, and an end, and that stops people who waffle too much. It puts a structure in that to stop them waffling, or people who don't talk enough by saying. One of the structures we use is say answer the question straight away, give an example and summarize. So people who don't talk enough, it gives them enough opening and closing statements to make the answer seem fuller. A big technique we teach loads of people just list stats and information. I do A, B, and C. My skills are A, B, and C. And what we do is get people to turn it into a story, because stories help your interviewer imagine or see yourself in that situation. When an interviewer sees you doing a job, they'll feel more emotionally connected to you. And if you're talking about you, the other structure we do is say state the problem, state what you did to overcome that problem, and then state the positive outcome using like a story platform. So we're getting to build up like loads of intrigue. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy. We had 8 months, and then everyone's going to get made unemployed, or you can build stuff into that. I did this, and you can create this story, and people get really drawn into that. So it's just little things, little changes that have real big impact.
Yeah, no, it's far more engaging, and no, that's a really good point. Because it's far more engaging, and I think that's really important and critical to use story, and I think that selling yourself in the best possible way. Whilst I don't like to use the word selling yourself, in the end, really, we're all salespeople. People buy people. That's the long and short of it. That's the key, and it's not always easy. I remember an experience once, and that was a really fascinating point you made there, where I was going to go in to deliver a talk on mental skills for sports performance to the one of the biggest rugby league clubs in the world. And prior to me going in to this club, Chris, they had well, they told me anyway, from my understanding, I had an Olympic champion who'd won 5 gold medals or something along them lines do a talk a few days earlier. That's what they said. So the guy brought me in and says, by the way, Jim, I said, you could have told me this before I got here. So as I walked from the car park, it's my turn to deliver this talk on mental skills training. And he says, by the way, we just had I shan't mention names, the Olympic cyclist who just won so many medals, gold medals. And I thought, oh, goodness me, that's a big billing to live up to. Here's me turning up. Where do I go from there? So I thought, you know what? I stopped for a moment and I said, rather than comparing myself to anybody else, why don't I just go in there, be my own unique self, and draw from my experience, all the years of experience I've got, being a therapist, coach, so on and so forth, and just draw from that. And I did what you said. I used a story, and the story was about how just because you're champions this year doesn't mean you're going to be champions the following year. Just because someone gives you their subjective experience doesn't mean you're going to take a lot or little away from that. Everyone's got their own unique. So I used a really powerful story, and we're short of time, so I won't go into too much detail. And it was all about how some of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life have been from people who, all walks of life, whether they're Olympic champion, whether they're, Joe Bloggers walking the street, whether they're a single parent bringing up 2 kids on their own, whether they're anybody, someone who's retired, who you can learn from everybody, really. I think everyone's got value to bring, and I focused on that, and I did it in the story, and they were just engaged, Chris. They really were. They're just like you hear a pin drop, and I think that's a great point you made. And I think storytelling is powerful. When we go to school in the early years, we do a lot of it. Then we sort of go to a more left brain way of learning, which I don't necessarily agree. I think our teachers need to do a great job. I mean, the system needs to change. I won't go into too much detail with that. But I think what you said there is really important. You've got to be intrigued, you've got to use imagination. I think it's really important to do that within the context of the environment. Yeah. I think when you're doing a story, the story's got to be in a metaphor associated to the environment you're in. If you're going to pluck a story out of the sky, it's got no relevance, it's not going to work. And the one you used there, the company going bankrupt and what you did, and that's really powerful, rather than using stats, like X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. So really, really fascinating stuff. And I think, Chris, is what I found in my experience. No matter how long I do what I've done and how long I sort of carry on doing what I do, there's nothing. I mean, it's so invaluable to have someone to bounce ideas off.
Yeah.
I think it's key. You could be the best at what you do, and it's like I use the analogy. You could be the best footballer in the world. You still need a coach. A coach needs a coach. And I know if I was going through a big interview, I'd have no reservation hiring someone like yourself, because I know that I'm emotionally connected to the situation. I need someone who's going to be impartial, tell like it is. A bit like Toastmasters.
Yeah.
You get various feedback, and we need that. We need that feedback, I think, which is key. So I think people of all experiences, walks of life, would benefit from someone like yourself helping them to stand a better chance to get the job, to prepare, to go to that drawing board. It's not easy. Certainly not easy, and the numbers for jobs ratio from what we see is getting bigger and bigger and more challenging, and we've got to find a way to stand the best chance of getting the job. And what are your thoughts, Chris, in terms of people that you've worked with? You've worked with people of all experience levels. Do you have any specific area of people, person? Do you have the CEOs come and see you? Do you have the first job, the academics who graduate from university? Who's the most people who come to see you?
Well, just the first thing, Richard Branson says every employee should have a mentee, a mentor, because it's a bit like the coaching to soundboard ideas off. So I really agree. It's, I always have coaches all the time, different coaches, just to bounce ideas off people, to get me to get a different perspective. It's a great idea. But my clients really range from teenagers leaving school, people mid-career, and then CEOs. I have such a massive range. But the reason I wanted to tell you that as well is because all of them have the same concerns about job interviews. One, they're all fearful, often because they don't practice, and two, they don't believe they've got the skill set that they have. People always believe that their abilities are lower than they actually are. They just have they think they're winging it in the job, and like someday someone's going to find out and they'll get sacked. And when you get them to believe in themselves, when you get them to practice the interview questions and answers, and when you get them to have a structure to the way they're selling it, everyone from a school leaver all the way up to CEOs then perform better. It's the same barriers no matter what salary, sector, or sort of grade of job you're on. They're the same barriers that everyone has. And a good thing to remember as well as an interviewee, that your interviewer, like that CEO that I work with, is also scared of interviewing you. There's not many people who interview all the time. Even HR organisations don't constantly interview, and the training isn't out there for lots of people. So people wing how to interview nervous, just as scared, just as fearful as you are. And what you want to do in the interview is listen out for their nervousness in their voices, or when they sort of do like a silly little laugh or they repeat questions, because then you can sort of go, oh, they're nervous as well, I'll feel more relaxed now. But everyone's got the same barriers. They need to practice more, they need to predict the questions, and they need to have structures for their interview answers.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff, and I'm sure people will take a lot away from that. And time has gone so fast. Chris, the hour's gone really, really fast, and we could carry on speaking, no doubt. And anyone watching out there, and I'd certainly recommend watching again and seeing some key points and so on and so forth. And what I find really, really fascinating is that the opportunity comes, and sometimes the opportunities come once a lifetime. You get the opportunity to do an interview, and it's just whether they get in touch with you, me, or anybody else for that matter. It's priceless, really, when you think about it and think that whatever investment someone makes to improve it, and also the return, the potential return, which is key. And not only that, I think also these skills have a knock-on effect in life in general. I think you can transfer these skills across a broad range of areas. Yeah, improve the interview skills and best chance to get the job. Also in social situations, in general situations, it can go a long way towards bringing us on, our personality on, which is priceless too. We sort of come towards the end, Chris. At the end, I sort of, anyone who wants to get in touch, is there anyone I can get in touch with? Anyone got any questions about this evening, or they might want to hire your services, or they might want to ask questions applicable to the show? How can they get in touch, Chris? How can someone watching this evening who's got an interview, maybe not even got an interview coming up, want to know more about what you do? Your book's coming out too, in December too. Can you mention that as well? And how can they get in touch and talk about your new book as well?
Yeah, so all the interview stuff, you can just go to my website, which is www.employmentking.co.uk. There's loads of free things people can download, like predicted interview questions, sector-specific questions, 101 interview, like loads of stuff for job interviews that you can download. There's a YouTube channel attached to that as well with loads of different techniques to share. Yeah, so that's the best way, www.employmentking.co.uk. And my current book is out, which is the 73 Rules for Influencing the Interview. And the book in December is all about overcoming fears and phobias, and that's going to be called Evolve Your Mind. So yeah, that's out in December as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. And thanks for coming on the show. And anyone out there, I certainly recommend to get in touch with Chris. It's very generous of him to come on the show, and the free resources he offers and everything else that goes with it is phenomenal, dedicated to the cause, to helping people stand the best chance to get their job. Chris, has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on board, and no doubt we'll have you on board again at some point. Thanks again, Chris.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.